Children are born without boundaries. When children are born, they don't know what is right from what is wrong, and they behave to the best of their knowledge and understanding part-time. And that's why it is said that children are suicidal in nature. That's why a child can go to a high-rise building and want to jump down. That's why a child can see fire and want to dip the hand into it. And that's why children do so many things that we can't even explain why they act in those ways. And we are shocked why the children are doing those things. And that's why children do a lot of things that we scream, we yell as parents, and we assume that they should know those things. But then if you want our child to learn how to dance, we take them to a dance school. If you want them to learn how to swim, we take them to a swimming school. We take them to schools, regular schools, to make them literate, to be able to read and be able to write. But then we never teach them behavior. We just assume that they should know this behavior. And that is where the frustration comes in, because we assume they should know, and the children don't know. And then I hear parents saying, you should know, you should know, you should know. And I'm like, who's telling them? Behavior should be taught just like every other thing that you teach your child. You have to teach your child how to speak, how to sit, how to talk, how to respond, how to react. These are things that we teach our children. We have to be intentional about how our children behave. We shouldn't wait until the moment when those behaviors come up and then we start getting frustrated about why they act that way. We have to have specific expectations from our children, and these expectations have to be communicated with those children so they understand what we want from them. And then the moment we communicate these expectations to those children and we've taught those behaviors, that is when we can demand a response from them in terms of behavior. And that's how that is when we can hold them accountable for their actions or their inactions. But until we teach those behaviors, we can't assume and we can't hold them responsible for those behaviors. You can't punish a child, you can't discipline a child, you can't inflict fear into a child of a behavior they haven't taught the child. A lot of times we inflict fear into children for behaving a particular way without teaching a child how to behave right. Funny thing is that a lot of these behaviors that these children come up with, they are actually inherited behaviors. For example, a child with strong-willed will have a strong-willed father or a strong-willed mom. And then as adults, we have understood how to manage our behavior, even though we are strong-willed. We know when we can be strong-willed, and we know when to let go of the power. But a child doesn't know the difference. And then when a child begins to behave in a manner that shows that the child has a strong will, we begin to punish that child for that behavior instead of teaching the child how to manage the behavior. The child with strong-willed is born that way. And punishment is not going to take it out. And that's why I see at the end of the day, both people are frustrated. Because you tell a child, you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't do this. But has it taught the child what to do? That's because they are born without boundaries. And as parents, it's our role to set those boundaries for them and make them understand why certain behaviors are right and why certain behaviors are not right. And that's why we call it behavior modification. We are trying to modify those behaviors, and we are trying to set standards and set expectations for our children on the best way we think they should behave. Yes, sometimes we call behavior modification, we could call it discipline. But then some people assume that discipline is punishment. Discipline is different from punishment. When you're trying to modify a behavior, you're trying to redirect that behavior to the right expectation. But then punishment comes with the fact that you're trying to put fear of a behavior into a child. And so what happens when a child is punished is that the child is externally motivated to act in that way. And when a child is externally motivated, it means that the child acts in that way out of fear that comes with acting in the opposite way. And the child fears the punishment, and the child doesn't understand the behavior. And as long as the child doesn't understand the behavior and only fears the punishment, that behavior will be external. For a child to internalize the behavior, the child has to understand why that behavior is wrong. The child has to be taught the expectation, has to be taught the behavior, and has to understand internally why that behavior is right or wrong. So a behavior or an act for a child can be intrinsic or extrinsic. The intrinsic behavior is the one that the child does, whether you're there or you're not there. You're there, the child does the right thing. You're not there, the child still does the right thing because the child understands why that is right way to behave. Then the extrinsic behavior, to the external one, is the one that the child does only when you're there, because the child is afraid of the outcome of not acting in that way that you want the child to act in. And as adults, we are also guilty. I'm driving down the highway, for example, and I see the speed limit says 50. I go at a 60, and I don't see anything wrong in driving at a 60 until I see a constable's vehicle coming, and then I slow down to a 50. Now, why did I slow down to a 50? I could have been driving on a 60 for about 30 minutes, and then in 1 second, I sight a constable's vehicle and I slow down. Because as regards speed limits on the road, I am externally motivated, and I'm afraid of the punishment that comes with being pulled over for overspeeding. Now, I'm not slowing that because, oh, I now understand that it's wrong to speed. I'm slowing that because I'm afraid of what will happen if I am pulled over and I get a ticket. And that's the same thing with children. And that's not what we want for our children. We want children that can represent us wherever they are. Whether we are there or whether we are not there, we want our children to be good representatives of our names. We want to have children that will be proud. We want children that will behave in the right way in our presence and our absence. And that's where behavior modification comes in. So our focus as parents will be how to modify this behavior, how to redirect this behavior so our children act in the best way. And because they understand why that is the right way to behave, and not acting in those ways because they fear the punishment that comes in acting the opposite way. Because if that's what happens, we see a lot of cases where children are the best kids at home, but then in school or with their friends, they act in a different way. And that's because they've not internalized those behaviors. So as parents, our focus should be on our children internalizing behaviors as opposed to just external motivation. And as we go on in the course of the weeks, we'll talk about how to help our children internalize this behavior and understand the behavior and act in those ways as opposed to acting out of fear of a punishment. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to withdraw benefit from our children in ways to try to drag their behavior. But what I'm saying is that children should relate to their parents with respect and not fear. Our children should not be afraid of us. They should respect us. They should act in the way we want them to act out of respect for us and out of fear. You know, that's the best relationship to have with your child, because the more your child respects you, the more your child will want to be like you, the more your child will want to act in the way you want the child to be. But the more your child fears you, the more your child will be far away from you, and the less you are able to communicate with your child and know the innerness of your child. Thank you. Bye-bye.